I think Clark, we do owe the EC Council a big shout out right at the beginning for inviting us to do this fireside chat. And to the audience, it will be a fireside chat. Clark and I sort of talked about this. We thought it'd be a lot more interesting for us to just talk than to do a death by PowerPoint presentation. Although if you're experiencing or wanting some of what we say, we will happy to follow up with you, I guess, offline and provide context and color and any kind of reference material that you may need. But we do appreciate everyone attending, even though you're probably just attending for the CPEs, but hey. So yes, as they mentioned, yeah. Exactly. I'm a retired Lieutenant Colonel, active duty after 27 years. Personally, I served at Army Cyber Command, Network Enterprise Technology Command. I was at the while at Army Cyber at the NSA. As well as a few other positions that supported the cyber warfare operations and cyber community. How about you, Clark?
Yeah, so one little small nuance with me is I'm still in, right? I'm still serving as an Army Warrant Officer in the Army Reserves, hence the mustache as a warrant officer, and of course I got my coffee here. So
absolutely.
But I'm currently attached to a new cybersecurity company, or CSC. They actually just got created within the cyber branch this year. So I'm here in Tampa, Florida, which is also where the CSC is located. And I've been a part of several cyber exercises across the globe. Last year I was over in Poland helping train some Polish Army cyber forces and NATO allies on cyber incident response tactics. So that was a really great real world mission to get to go do. And stuff like that pops up pretty much every year as I've continued to stay in and be an active serving reservist. So also, first and foremost with that, happy Veterans Day, right? That's why we're doing this. I'm really excited to hopefully speak to a lot of veterans that are on the call. And if not, that's fine. But me and Terry are just going to share our experiences within the cyber realm, within the military, and then kind of how that's fed into our civilian and corporate careers.
Yeah, I think we're going to sort of follow three basic tenets. We wanted to cover sort of, the DoD role in cyber, how that translates into the commercial world, because both Clark and I have done both. How does the view of cyber's warfighting domain sort of spill over into what we see in the civilian community? I think we'd like to spend some time talking about, why veterans in this space are such a good addition, why veterans are a great addition to your team in general, why cyber warriors in particular can augment your operations, and then sort of talk about advice to veterans going forward who may be looking to do a reinvention of themselves post military service. And Clark and I both have a lot of experience in that transition to offer some practical advice. Clark, I'll just sort of play key moderator here for as we kick off. You as you mentioned are still serving. Sort of what's your view of cyber as a warfighting domain? And as we've talked, like what does that look like from a military perspective, and then your view on a civilian perspective?
Well, it's kind of a game of cat and mouse, to be quite frank. Adversaries are out there actively trying to get in the networks, trying to harden systems to be able to exploit those, right? But you have to keep up with the current tactics, right? So we call them TTPs, tactics, techniques, and procedures. And so those are always evolving. New exploits and vulnerabilities are found every day. And so as what we call ourselves defenders, right, in the cyberspace, you have your red team exercises, which are more of the offensive folks, but defenders, blue team exercising, hardening those environments, you have to keep up and know what's out in the wild. And that's pretty much the hardest part, really, is actively staying up with that. Being to make sure that you're able to monitor certain news feeds or articles, know what threat actors or nation states are doing. Those TTPs are critical in being able to defend those networks and identify bad, right? So that goes in par with certifications, trainings, and if you have the opportunity to be in real world experience, of course, that is probably the most number one preferred way to learn about it. But there's always different ways to keep up with it, and that's the challenge.
Yeah, I think the DoD, the Department of War, formerly known as the DoD, tends to be ahead of civilian population, even societal things. I mean, the DoD at the time, integrated well before any of the United States, and in a lot of respects, the Department of War had been thought leaders ahead of what society's ready to hear. And I sort of use the desegregation as a well ahead of this. Our society moves to make a more formal and equitable experience for all of our citizens. But I say that it was also true of cyber warfare, right? I mean, the DoD recognized this as a war-fighting domain. And what I mean that it's a contested space. It's adversarial. There is clearly advantages to being, it has offense, it has defense, it has attack exploitation, it has all the earmarks. It can even be kinetic, as we've seen with cyber operations, both in recent with the Russia and Ukraine, but even in the experience of Iran and Stuxnet, we clearly have a kinetic component to this as well. And so I think folks would do well to sort of adopt that mentality when it comes to this. So I think that number one, it might seem a little bit bellicose for most folks who are just in the civilian world, and it sounds a little hyperbolistic when you talk about it in terms of a war-fighting domain, but it really is contested space.
Yeah.
And I think that perspective tends to help when we look at it. It is an ongoing and evolving. In the civilian world, it's not only nation-state activity if you're in the defense industrial base, but it's also cybercrime. And so you have aspects of cybercrime, and we're looking at $10.5 trillion in the transfer of wealth to cybercrime. So these are huge things, and we do need to take this serious. They're existential threats to business, as well as existential threats to society writ large. When you talk about cyber capabilities of our adversaries.
Yeah, well, the DoD has certainly recognized it, especially with yesterday's official announcement with CMMC being solidified moving forward. So a lot of defense organizations are going to have to become CMMC compliant. But also with that said, cyber is still the newest branch in the Army. It only got stood up in 2014. So it's going on over a little bit over a decade now, right? But it's still considered new in that aspect. And again, the government and DoD is a little bottleneck in some regard, in regards to comparison with the commercial space, is because, I mean, we saw what happened earlier this year with, the open source communication platform and Signal, right? Signal group chats. That's an open source E2E encrypted group chat that, certain members of the DoD were using, that they got in trouble for using, right? Or maybe how they used it more specifically. But those are kind of bottlenecks that the government has to face to be able to use tools out there that may be open source or, not approved through the military or government, that a corporate organization can readily pick up and use with little hesitation, right? So that's a small thing that you can gain a lot more experience by not having as many obstacles to overcome in the commercial space than the government. But I think it's getting better. I think we're getting the right systems in place. CMMC is a big thing to help process procedures fall in place to actually get those things properly approved. And then, of course, to give it to our warfighters to use.
Yeah, I do think that there are some practical examples of how sort of the view of cyber as a warfighting domain can help. In fact, I've used it in several talks. If you remember back to World War II, there was an effort to do strategic daylight bombing campaigns over Central Europe, and it was horribly expensive in both terms of equipment, but more importantly, in the lives lost, hundreds of thousands over the course of the war over that daylight bombing campaign. And the battlefield statisticians they did a battle damage assessment of all of the returning aircraft to figure out where they would harden the aircraft. And of course, if you remember, they sort of had a heat map, and it's an airplane that's got all of the red dots where those returning aircraft sustain damage. And they started to apply hardening to where you saw the propensity of damage. And Abraham Vald from Columbia University saw this, and he said, whoa, time out, folks. You're looking at this in the inverse. These are the aircraft that survived, i.e. it's survivable damage.
Yeah.
You need to be looking at where there is no damage, because that's clearly where the aircraft got hit that did not come back. And they called that became survivorship bias, right? It became a field of study. And I've used that as an example of, like, in our civilian world, it's very difficult to understand where your next best security dollar is spent when you're looking at your empirical evidence, like the things that hit my environment. So we build our networks there, for confidentiality, integrity, availability, resiliency, and recovery, right? We build them based on those principles, but that's the view we have on the world from that point forward. And the military does intelligence prep of the battlefield, right? We look at all kinds of historical data. We look at tactics, techniques, procedure. We look at capabilities. We look at density of force. We look at how we are arrayed, how the adversaries were. We create all of that. And so I really think that mentality is very helpful when I'm going to spend my next security dollar. You have to look at where other people have failed. What is the incident response kind of telemetry telling us? What is the capabilities? What, as you mentioned, the TTPs of the adversary, because you may not see that empirically in your environment, right? You don't know what you don't know in your environment. All you can see is what the telemetry that you have arrayed against the adversary. And so looking at the propensity of where others have failed, or the data that others have gathered, and then overlaying that against your security apparatus, then you get a better idea of, like, okay, where is the next best security dollar spent? Because we do get lulled into a false sense of security. We put our EDR agents, MDR capabilities, and we just assume we're catching everything. But you have to look at where
can of worms, rabbit hole to go down.
Well, I think it's important. A lot
of organizations deploy EDR, but they're not monitoring it properly. They don't have it configured appropriately, and they think that because they have an EDR deployed, that it's protecting their network. The terminology we use in the industry is defense in depth, right? Mm-hmm. You want to have more than just one solution in place. You can't have a single point of failure, which also ties into military tactics, right? Single points of failure. You want to avoid those at all costs. Also, and to note, to kind of what you're bringing into, real world scenarios, and we talked about you need to know what you have in your organization to protect. It also goes beyond that, right? Supply chain management of who you do business with. How do they integrate with your business? I mean, looking at one of the most, I would argue, sophisticated attacks in modern day time, you had brought up Stuxnet a few years ago, but last year in 2024 with Operation Grim Beeper. Are you familiar with that? With the Israeli attack on the pagers?
Oh, yeah.
They integrated into
I didn't know it was called Grim or Beeper. I thought that was funny as hell. Sorry.
It's called Operation Grim Beeper. And, they infiltrated the supply chain of the Hezbollah, who they were buying their pagers from, knowing that they wanted to try to be more sophisticated and go to a more dated technology, thinking it was more secure. And lo and behold, that supply chain was infiltrated. Right? It led to a pretty sophisticated cyber attack where the pagers all literally blew up at the same time, knowing that these were going to be attached to people's hips. So that's a real world cyber incident that occurred that had loss of life that we can learn from.
Yeah, I don't. There's a lot of talk. I'm going to take sort of an opposite view of this, and we can argue a little bit about it. I've made the argument that yes, there is a supply chain threat, and quote unquote, it's growing. I actually think it's always been there. But now you've used a very, very sophisticated level of intelligence operation and infiltration. But what I see across the wider body of evidence in the commercial space is, yes, you can get compromised upstream by upstream vendors. But almost invariably, it's the same top three initial access vectors that it always is. Like, I've been given a lot of these data-driven talks on the threat landscape. And the top three initial access vectors have been the top three 10, 20 years now. It is malware introduced through email. It's unpatched systems and services or software, and it's compromised credentials. I mean, that's what it's been. The top three is and invariably, we talk about supply chain and it was compromised, but invariably it's been compromised upstream by email borne malware, an unpatched system or service, or and I guess the other aspect that we need to pay attention to, and Jen Easterly has been very, very outspoken on this, is for far too long, commercial industry and to an extent that the government have just accepted the fact that crappy code and crappily written and validated code is just the norm. Like, we've accepted the fact that software is always going to be vulnerable, and maybe the preponderance of that's true, but I don't think we should accept that. I'm a big believer that we should be pressure testing and validating, and we should have some level of expectation that the code and the software that we're using, applications we introduce in our environment, i.e. SolarWinds, Kaseya, Microsoft, whatever that capability is, we should, as consumers, expect that it should be the exception to the rule that there is unsecured code, or there's a library that wasn't tested, et cetera. We just have accepted it too long. Your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, well, certainly no argument there. I agree with you. And, the Operation Grim Reaper thing is very much a specific skewed outlier, but just goes to show what type of sophistication can be used. I think when it comes to code development and securing code, I'm a big proponent, and maybe we can argue about this, of open source software because of exactly what you're alluding to. The government doesn't really like it, but from an open source perspective, it's exactly what it entails, that it is open source. Anybody has access to it, they can review it, they can look at the code. And the idea behind that is that it will make it more secure because it is so open, right? Anybody can look at potential vulnerabilities, or maybe they have bug bounty programs where people actually identify vulnerabilities and they get paid for it, right? That's more of like a certified ethical hacking approach rather than nefarious activity. But having your code reviewed, not just by competent developers, and maybe this can even dip into the realm of AI here, is using AI as a tool, not as a solution, but as a tool to assist you in making sure that maybe things are more hardened or more secure, more properly developed, right? These are the things that, to go into what you're saying, a lot of people say if it's not broke, don't fix it, right? It's working, the code's working. So why change it? Why try to intentionally break something that is currently working? Well, attacks become more sophisticated, exploits become known every day, right? Those are the kind of things that people don't necessarily think about proactively.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up AI on that one, because it's hugely powerful capabilities for both us and adversaries. I think in the adversarial arena, what we've seen is a compression of time windows, right? Dwell times have gotten compressed. Exploitation of 0 days have gotten compressed. I mean, it used to be a flash to bang time from 0 day to wild exploit. Our exploits in the wild was maybe weeks, sometimes months. Now it can be hours. The capability and every one of the major AI vendors, from Anthropic to Chat to Grok, even the Microsoft with their Copilot is incredibly powerful. The GitHub version of Copilot, and I do think that those are the adversaries are already using them. So if you're not using them as a defender, you need to figure out how to do that and how to do it safely. And that's always kind of this disparity, because we as defenders can't just throw shit in our environment, right? We have to ensure that whatever we're putting in our environment isn't going to add an exploit, right? The adversary don't care. Reality, yes, they have to worry about their own back-end infrastructure, et cetera, and being secure to a limited extent, but they don't have to worry about to the degree of security efficacy that we do as defenders. And so there's always going to be a lag between employment of a capability by adversaries and then what we adopt as defenders. So I implore defenders to don't bury your head in the sand. These capabilities are not going away. You're not rolling them back. They're not removed. They're not going to exit the landscape. So you better get very smart in how you can employ them safely. What vulnerabilities they may introduce to your environment, mitigate them. but you're going to have to start leveraging these capabilities if you want to stay at least at parity with the adversary, much less at a close second.
Certainly. And I think it's also important to bring up data classification and the type of industry you work in, right? So for example, with PNG Cyber, we're mainly a DFIR firm, digital forensics and incident response. So we deal with incidents, or the B word, breaches, right? And a lot of that from the commercial space is typically revolved around money or extortion, aka ransomware, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the DoD space, it's not necessarily that clear to be having a nefarious nation-state threat actor coming after you for money, right? They want information. They want to get in your network and hide to obtain as much information and data stealing as they can. So it depends on where you're positioned in the industry and what data you have to pretty much identify who might be targeting you,
right,
to then defend yourself against those significant potential targets, right? So that's also important to know is are they going to be coming after you for money? Are you going to be defending the classified data in your environment? Or what exactly do you need to be looking for? Because that can range depending on what you do.
No, I think far too many people consider business risk assessments as kind of a paperwork exercise and not really trying to assess where they are in the terms of the threat landscape. I would argue that if you're on the internet, you're a potentially victim of cybercrime. That's ubiquitous. Sure. I do think, however, whether or not you fall into the realm of a nation state, you have to sort of look at it not only what you do, but who you do business with. Like, are you a downstream vendor? Are you an upstream vendor? Where are you in the terms of a profile of a nation state actor? You're right. And
world map. You are here.
Exactly. And I mean, we can bend them by motivation. You know this. I mean, in Instant Response, we do this quite a bit, right? I mean, so you have your nation states, which is governmental industrial espionage. You have, or sometimes kinetic, depending on the environment. You have your cybercrime, which is all about the Benjamins. Its motivation is simply the theft of dollars. You have hacktivism, which is, I did have a customer years ago who did genetically modified crops, right? And hacktivism was a big thing for them. I don't know why people get all up in ire about genetically modified crops. I mean, feeding the world, I guess you would think is a good thing, but apparently people take great umbrage that you modified grain to be more resilient to arid conditions, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, they were big anti against the GMO, and so as a consequence, hacktivism was really big. And then of course, I think we have to mention the insider. And I mentioned the insider for two reasons. Number one, there's the unintended insider, which it always is someone clicking. Someone always clicks and thwarts all of your security activity because they enable the malware. But there's also the experience that I think that made some headlines with Microsoft. It's going to be who you hire. And is that person that you're hiring actually, an agent of another government?
Well, right? I know you experienced this personally, right?
Yeah, and so as a consequence, you have to sort of you have to ask yourself, like, what is my core mission? Who are my customers? What am I protecting? And then do I have the right visibility not only on my cyber, my physical security, but even in my HR department am I vetting the folks according to what they're doing in my environment? And so I again, this can be an existential threat to your business. I don't think people fully appreciate that, but if you're a small to mid-sized company, the data is pretty harsh. It says if you've been a victim of cybercrime, like a ransomware in particular, within 60% of small businesses go out of business within 6 months after that happening. It's incredible. And I don't think people fully appreciate the rubric involved. It's not just the ransom, it's not just the cleanup and the reconstitution of your environment, but it is brand damage and it is the litigation tail. I mean, the litigious nature of society globally. I mean, we're talking, if you're paying a lawyer $1,500 an hour to defend you, or an army of lawyers, 10 or 12 of them, and they're all charging $1,000 an hour, to defend you against lawsuits based on data breach and data theft. I mean, we're talking crushingly expensive, and can put companies out of business in short order. And I don't think folks fully appreciate the economic impact of cyber and the cyber threat landscape.
Yeah, I think that kind of gets more into the proactive approach, right? Is trying to justify additional cost to defend your assets. And I mean, for me, I like to learn things through other people's mistakes, and not my own mistakes. But of course, I learn from my own. But seeing how what you just said should resonate with any small or medium business, right? 60% go out of business within a year after they suffer a ransomware attack. So just knowing that should justify a cost to deploy, for example, an EDR on your network, right? To be able to have something that could identify when intrusion takes place. And that's something that I'm starting to see organizations kind of become a little bit more acceptable of, is the proactive justification for defending your assets from a cost perspective, right? Because they're starting to see what these cyber criminals are extorting for, X, sometimes up in the millions of dollars, right? So that's going to be another decision to make from the organization, but it starts with everything that you're saying is awareness, right? And this is why we hint on cybersecurity awareness training, knowing that all these different types of attacks. You don't have to go into the weeds and know every single detail around, what a ransomware attack looks like, or what any type of extortion attempt is, but understand what the end goal for the cyber criminals are and different types of attacks that can happen to your environment. That can really help identify and justify those costs ahead of time, to make sure it doesn't happen.
Yeah, and it's not something you need to wait till a crisis happens. I'm always amazed at how many people never answer the hard questions until they're required to.
Yep.
But you don't need to actually suffer a cyber crime or data breach from a nation state or a cyber crime group to think through the appropriate responses and the level of what ifs that go on to even something as simple as, do I pay a ransom, right? I mean, and everyone's like, I'll never pay the terrorist. Well,
and then it happens. And
you can actually do the math on whether or not it's more cost effective to pay, et cetera. But you don't need to wait till that happens. But it does bring up something, and it's a good segue into the next piece, which is crisis management. And you in particular at PNG do the incident response and digital forensics. And myself, I've been an incident response commander from some of the world's largest ransomware engagements, and I will tell you that it's folks ask me what's if I had to sum up sort of the incident response commander, what's missing in incident response engagements, and I think this is really important on Veterans Day, but crisis management.
Oh, yeah.
Calm leadership, dispassionate leadership, positive mental attitude, taking care, creating a battle rhythm, understanding that you're in a marathon, not a sprint. Looking at this strategically, creating order from chaos, from all the competing interests that you'll have, providing an overlay of that emergency management, that emergency operations center that we're so used to in the military tends to be a foreign concept in a lot of commercial arena. And I think it's one of the sort of the benefits of hiring veterans, particularly combat veterans who've done this in contested environments across the world during wartime, right? Whether it directly in war or supporting the warfighter, but where the stakes are really, really, really high and life really does matter, and how well you do these operations. And so bringing that, and the military does this very well. I mean, we breed leaders to be crisis managers, right?
Yeah.
and I think that civilian organizations would do well to leverage these kind of capabilities from your veteran pool, right? I mean, we have a lot of folks that have a tremendous amount of experience. And look, if you've done this job being shot at, you're it's not nearly as stressful, when you're doing it like as a complete civilian, right? I mean, you've actually done this in war, right? We've actually done this in the most contested environments you can have, and I think it's important to leverage those other leadership characteristics, like cool under pressure, calm under fire, calm leadership in chaos, approaching things in a very methodic way, imposing battle rhythm on chaos. They call it battle rhythm for a reason, right? I mean, even in the chaos of war, you can choose the density and velocity of your response actions, right? And deliberately making those things and working through segues and corollaries in your planning. Like, you need to anticipate the things that could potentially happen. And I am a big believer in leveraging the sort of the innate skills that come out of soldiers who've learned this sort of over the period of their service. What are your thoughts on that, Clark?
Yeah, I mean, to tie it all together with, cybersecurity, specifically the flavor of incident response, and today being Veterans Day, hiring veterans working in incident response, is companies out there, a lot of people may see, oh, we're a veteran-friendly organization. Maybe not everybody knows what that means, but if you're a veteran-friendly organization, you're advertising as such, and you're a cybersecurity firm or have an incident response department within your organization, and you want to hire a veteran, you are guaranteed to be getting at least, I know exactly one aspect of that individual that you are getting, and that's going to be a resilient person, right? The skill set, that can vary, but hopefully they've gone through enough training or they can develop that skill set afterwards. But we see this all the time within incident response. Is organizations, they have their policies in place, right? It says you do X, Y, Z, but then stuff hits the fan and they lose their cool. They don't know exactly what to do. They kind of run around the chicken with their head cut off, for lack of a better analogy. But we do these things and we practice them every day in the military. It's all about readiness and training within the military, so that way when you actually come across a situation, and most of the time, if those veterans have already been deployed to a war zone, they've already done it, right? So they're proven to be a resilient person, even if they've just gone to basic training, right? Basic training is created and engineered to be the most chaotic situation, at least at that point in your life, that you've ever gone through. And that's intentional, right? That's supposed to make you be able to make decisions in stressful, high impact situations. And that is what can be blanket across any veteran that is in the ranks, whether branch agnostic at that. So if there is a specific flavor of cybersecurity that a veteran is best tailored towards, it's incident response.
Yeah, and so a few things. I mean, given all things are equal, there's always the unknown when you're hiring someone, and not everybody who's a veteran is going to be a grade A person, right? There are there's always that kind of outlier who kind of give everybody else a bad name. Sure. But all things being equal, when looking for someone to bring onto your team, if you bring someone on your team who has been brought up in an environment where resiliency and proactivity and discipline and loyalty are characteristics from the get-go, or do you hire an unknown quantity? And this is to my advice to veterans. And I've hired, like, literally, I've interviewed hundreds of people in my last 10 years. I retired in 2014. I've been in the commercial space, both at Dell SecureWorks and my own company now for a long time. And we interview and hire a lot of folks. And I will tell you, from personal experience, I am less concerned on whether or not you have a 4-year degree than whether you have a passion to learn and whether you have discipline and a creative mind. Like, passion to learn trumps everything. And veterans tend to, like, look, we get thrown into environments where we have to learn new things on the fly. We have the discipline to learn them. We understand that that there's loyalty, there's tenacity, there's fortitude, there's calm under pressure. These are the innate characteristics that help someone perform in a commercial environment. And I don't want veterans out there who maybe who've gotten out and are floundering and are wondering why they're not succeeding. Look, in the cybersecurity arena and security in general and whatnot, don't let a 4-year degree be the barrier. Like I don't even look at 4-year degrees. I first judge, do you have the basic understanding of what we need you to learn? Do you have a passion for learning? Can you learn it? Do you have discipline? Do you have fortitude? Are you going to show up every day to work? And can you learn something? And those qualities make amazing employees. In fact, I found that a lot of times my self-learners, those that are reinventing themselves, whether that be military, whether that be law enforcement, hell, I've had a chef who got tired of running the restaurant business, and became an amazing SOC analyst who went on to become a director of Microsoft. You can reinvent yourself. Do not, please, if you're a veteran out there and you're hearing my voice, do not think that the only path to success, you got to go to college, you got to spend that GI Bill to get the 4-year degree. In a lot of respects, you're wasting a lot of time. You can accelerate your learning by all, like EC Council has great freaking content, right? You can use your veterans benefits, certificates, hands-on knowledge, passion for learning. Don't let that 4-year degree barrier. Are there some careers that require that? Absolutely. But please, in the technical arena, know-how, common sense, passion for learning, discipline, and reliability are way, way, way more important.
Yeah, I mean, so just here at PNG Cyber, one of our DFIR case leads, he was a forward observer, and now he's working in IR. I got another buddy of mine who was a tanker during the invasion of Fallujah, right? He used to be an engineer at Amazon, and now he's a chief operating officer and just crushing life. You don't have to have those degrees or even real world experience. And I know a lot of people as well, because I'm assuming there's a lot of non-veterans on this call too, listening in, and this is a human trait, right? Is suffering from imposter syndrome, right? Of not thinking you're qualified for a role that maybe you're applying towards, or maybe you got the role and you're scared to take it because you've never done that before. I think veterans inherently are less prone to that type of thought process and behavior because all we ever do is something we've never done before. So every 3 years, if you're an active duty soldier, you're getting stationed somewhere else, you're learning a new job, right? Whenever you get deployed, you're learning a new job, you're doing a new thing, you're working with new people. I think veterans encourage those challenges. And I think a lot of interview processes these days are focused around technical aspects, which are great, right? You want to learn those technical aspects and know, but from a veteran perspective is if you are proven to be resilient and dedicated to the role, you're going to learn those things. And I know some of the best people in the industry that did it, right? I've seen this be a perfect use case.
Yours truly.
Yeah, exactly. You're both of us, right? I was a radio guy when I first joined the military, right? So yeah, I mean, it's happened over and over.
You can see behind me, clearly I didn't start in cyber, right? I mean,
yeah, you got some airborne photos behind you. Yeah, so
you don't have to start here to end here. And this is true of not only veterans, but I mean, it's true of anyone wanting to sort of reinvent themselves or looking at life. And oh, by the way, nothing will be static. I used to argue for frontline intrusion analysis, et cetera, et cetera. AI sort of have done that. Look, it's the passion to learn, it's the passion to adapt, is most fundamental. You made a great point, like the imposter syndrome. In almost every case where I was given a new position or leadership position, the only track record I had was a willingness to learn something new, right? I mean, and you're going to jump in with both feet. The old adage in the military is when in charge, take charge. I mean, but that's true of yourself. Like you're in charge of your own life. If you're in charge of your own life, take charge of your own life. And that means don't let conventional wisdom, which, oh, by the way, isn't very often wisdom, and it's always almost wrong, right? It's don't let someone else define you and what your capabilities are. Follow passion, follow a desire to learn. and don't let those things stop you. I mean, if you want a 4-year degree, get a 4-year degree. That I'm not disparaging education. Education is important. I'm just saying that not all paths lead to $100,000 worth of student loan debt, right? I mean, I'm encouraging. I'm really encouraging. My everyone who is youngsters that come into my life, like, look, you need to look at alternatives. The world is full of ubiquitous information now. You can learn. EC Council is a perfect example, and I'm touting our sponsor here. Amazing content, ever present, easily accessible. Price is very reasonable to what you're going to get. You're going to have hands-on experience. What better way to sharpen your skill set for a different opportunity? I
have my CEH through military benefits. So
there you go.
Exactly.
Incredibly important. And by the way, even with certificates, it's a baseline. It starts the process, and from there you get experience, and that experience, but it's about desire to learn what's next. And again, I actually prefer certifications and self-starters than I do. Like I always gravitate to that. Why? Because it takes discipline to learn something on your own, right? And it's a certification process and
discipline, hard work, right? Certifications are huge too. I got a bunch of letters after my name, right? But I think a lot of people who go through certifications, they always think, when I get this certification, I'm gonna have made it, right? I'm gonna be there. And then you get there, you pass the certification, and then you're like, oh my gosh, there's so much more, and it's not gonna stop. I think especially in cybersecurity, and kind of what we first talked about on this call, is that there is always gonna be changing, and that's why I love this industry. Is cybersecurity does not stop. It doesn't stop evolving, it doesn't stop growing, and it certainly won't stop attacks and threat actors from doing nefarious activity. So don't ever think when you accomplish X, you're gonna have made it, right? There is always going to be more. And I think people only learn that after the fact. It's like, oh my gosh, I thought I was gonna make it, but then now here I am, and I still see a mountain in front of me. But all right, let's go. Left foot in front of right foot, right? And then you keep climbing the mountain. You get to the peak, and then you find another mountain.
I don't know how anyone. I mean, if you find yourself in stasis, I mean, that's the reality. Is life is always a journey. We're never at the place. And I said that the true measure of a person is not where they are today. It's where they started and where they're going, right? And it's the journey that matters here. And honestly, don't be bound by where you were yesterday. And don't rest on your laurels either, right? I mean, I didn't happen to just fall into the job of CEO of a corporate entity. You have to you have to be deliberate in your taking care of your own destiny. But also that doesn't mean you have to have a 1-to-1 path to get there. I mean, my undergraduate degree was history and political science. I got a master's in telecom engineering, and I went to the Army School of Telecom Systems Engineering, and then I went to the cyber warfare, all that kind of stuff. But it wasn't that's where I started, and hell, I was an infantry soldier. I had nothing whatsoever to do with cyber when I started this. I mean, I made my living with my M1A2 troop carriers. You walk with a heavy load on your back. Don't be bound.
Comes from,
Exactly. Don't be bound by where you are today. And the veterans and by the way, or people thinking about military service, there are intangibles that help define you as well. Do not minimize that in your experience level. Look, the other thing I would give at veterans is some advice. We're terrible resume writers. We write NCOERs and OERs, and we get evaluation reports, and we go before the board on all that, and it's all geared towards the Army, and that's great. But nobody in the civilian world understands any of that, and it's often please, and I love the guys at ACAP and gals at ACAP, and I appreciate all of that work, but avail yourself to someone who's actually written or read a civilian resume. There are a lot of really good resume writers out there. I actually paid a woman, Deborah Eastman, to do mine, who took all that great, wonderful experience, and translate it into something that a corporate hirer would understand and would appreciate. And I guess my one tidbit, it's not I led this, then no one cares. In the civilian world, it's about outcomes. I achieved the following. This was the role, this was the outcome. This was the role, this is the outcome. Outcomes are the only thing that matter in life, right? The road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? Intentions don't matter, outcomes matter. And that's true of your resume as well. So don't forget that your resume is about outcomes, not by here's the job I had, here's the role I had, here's how much money I was responsible for. That doesn't matter to a civilian, right? It matters to those that are in the military, but to the rest of us, it's about what you achieved while in that role. What were the things that defined you in those roles? How did you improve the organization? It doesn't have to be, margin improvements and all that good stuff, because you won't find that translation in the military. But it's defining and articulating what outcomes you achieved, and that's really, really important. So I don't see any questions in the question and answer, Clark. So we can just keep chatting until they tell us to give us a hook. But if you, just to the audience, if there's questions for me or Clark, you can put them in the box there and we'll address it. I'm staring at an empty queue. So either we're boring the snot out of you, or you just don't know that you can write questions in. So feel free to pose a question if there's something that you'd like us to talk about.
Yeah, well, a couple of things as well is, hopefully if you don't mind soliciting yourself here, I'll do it for you, is reach out to me on LinkedIn or Terry. And if you need help with writing a resume or just want to chat or whatever it may be, I'm certainly available and would love to assist. I think another thing, and just, in honor of Veterans Day and kind of what we talked about, coming from certain different backgrounds, that's probably one of the most interesting things about, if you have a team member or coworker, whatever it may be, that is a veteran, but that's all you really know is, Jeff served in the Navy. Go up to them today and say, hey, can I hear a little bit about your background? What's your story, right? Because I guarantee you will be hearing some interesting things that you never would have heard or thought that would have came from them. And if you're a veteran yourself, try to go out there and maybe ask another veteran about their background and share your story, because people are interested, right? And that's what makes the world go round, is people. And I know, especially with the AI fear and anxiety of nowadays, people, is scared that AI is going to take over. We're going to have Arnold Schwarzenegger come into play and, destroy the world here. But people still make the world go round. Yeah.
AI will never appreciate a sunset. Anyway, I'm getting the high sign from our team members at EC Council that they want to take back over for us, Clark. Okay. So I'm going to defer to our team at EC Council to lead the last part of this webinar. I'd love your advice in managing that feeling. I get that feeling to this day. As the CEO of a corporation, and oh, by the way, this company that I'm in, Cape Endeavors, has grown exponentially in the last 4 years, and I still get imposter syndrome. And I'm talking to other CEOs, of G100 and G500, and I look at their resume and I still go, when you try to compare yourself to others. I would say that, look, you have to sort of have self-confidence, and you gain confidence from doing it, but you're never going to learn it till you do it. I think everyone, even those if you aren't, if you don't suffer a little bit from imposter syndrome, then I think you're probably a megalomaniac, right? I think that if you care, you should always question, what am I not doing right? I think, it's the Peter principle, where you've reached a level of your own confidence, and it's up to you to fill the gap. But again, the way you handle, at least personally, the way I handle imposter syndrome is to keep learning. If you're uncomfortable in material that's being presented to you, or decisions that you have, or data that you need, do not be afraid to go get that data. And oh, by the way, no one person can ever know enough. That's why we have teams. you should be bright enough and smart enough and a leader enough to know what you're not smart at, and hire people or surround yourself by people who are. Don't be threatened by people who know more than you. You should be encouraged by people knowing more than you that are around you. Leverage them. People who try to know everything and control everything invariably will fail.
If you're the smartest person in the room, find a new room.
Exactly. Absolutely.
And I know I mentioned veterans are less prone to imposter syndrome, and let me, I guess, correct my statement on that. It's more around being comfortable, being uncomfortable. And Terry and I suffer from it as well, right? It's just that we've been in situations like this countless times. So we understand the feeling and we suffer from it, but we know that's a common and right feeling to feel. So the more exposure you have to it, it's just a human element, understanding to challenge yourself. If you're feeling that way, hear it from both of us. We feel that way too. If
you're not feeling that, you should have a little of that all the time, right? You're not trying hard enough. If you're that comfortable, you think you got it, you're not learning. I will answer it the way my young brilliant friend Mike Wegand answered it. He's a former cyber warrior, former infantry ranger, the whole 9 yards, former military planner, and he's like, this is a tool. You need to learn to use the tool. Like you wouldn't go back to trying to launch the NASA space program on slide rules today, right? No one would go back to not using the capability that's been harnessed in PC and distributed computing power. The same is true for AI. You can't put it back in the box. So it behooves you to learn how to leverage it, because it can be incredibly powerful. Are there risks? Absolutely. There's risks to every new capability. That's why you have to learn to mitigate them. But look, I use AI every day. We use it in almost all aspects of our company, everything from marketing, interpretation of data and generating content to how we enable pressure testing our code development, how we proofread documentation, how do we improve our content, all of that stuff. You have to understand it's a tool out there that you can leverage. Any thoughts, Clark?
Yeah, no, I hinted on it in our discussion, right? Is just not using AI as the solution, and like you mentioned, using it as a tool. Certain, ideas around that are, of course, you want to make sure you don't put sensitive data into an online AI tool. But if you have, a firewall rule set and you want to take either a screenshot or a small export of that firewall rule set and say, hey, AI, tell me if I have any security gaps here, or what rules may need to be ahead of what other rules. That's a perfect use case to help harden your environment, is just to say, hey, AI, take a look at these firewall rules. Is there anything else I can do to make this a better secured system? Things like that. So from my understanding, the DoD doesn't have too much of an applicable play here. It's more of the FBI, so a separate 3-letter agency. So the FBI has what's called the IC3, or Internet Crimes Complaint Center. That's where you go to report any type of ransomware or extortion attempts to the FBI. And then the FBI takes it and they go and investigate to hopefully, take down these cyber criminals or threat actors out there. But I know CMMC might have a small aspect of that, of just making sure your processes and procedures are in place. But I'm not sure if you wanted to add anything from a DoD perspective there, Terry.
It's just my wish list. I think that given the transfer of wealth and the amount of damage it does to our economy, I would love to see cyber criminals added to the global war on terror. I do think they're terrorist organizations. They're terrorizing people and their businesses, and they're certainly putting hospitals, et cetera, at risk. I would love to see the Department of War be able to go after cybercrime organizations and treat them just like we do cyber criminals. That's me personally. I think that we won't make any headway until we do that. Until you start attacking the infrastructure and the people and treating them like the terrorists they are, we're not going to get a lot. And so I would love to see the Department of War take that on. I'd rather see them spend time blowing up cybercrime buildings than I would drug mule boats. But that's just
boats me. In the Gulf.
Yeah. I'd much it'd be better spent doing cyber warfare tactics. Anyway,
a little bit about this, but to go into more detail, I think the best free resource that anybody can just dive into is YouTube, right? We joke around in the cybersecurity space of, people have certifications or whatnot through YouTube Academy. And that's what that means, right? Is go out there. You can just Google, cybersecurity influencers to follow. And, I follow them myself. I watch a lot of the videos. I don't want to name drop anyone in specific, but just if you do that Google, you okay. Terry, you can go throw some out there then.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with you. And EC Council, of course, obviously is a sponsor, but they have great content. Number one, figure out what you're passionate about. What are you really interested in? There's nothing worse than trying to learn something that you hate. So figure out what you don't want to do. But if you're interested in it, I recommend a guy called Network Chuck. I forget Chuck's last name.
Okay. I wanted to say Network Chuck, but
Network Chuck is amazing as far as a YouTube personality who just gives
awesome.
15 minutes snip, like TED Talks of great stuff. The guy's phenomenal. I met him at Black Hat or DEF CON this year.
Lab enthusiast. You can learn a lot.
Just fantastic. Right, him and John Hammond.
You got John Hammond out there. Network Chuck. There's a few others that are just coming to.
Those are my two favorites.
Ransby, I think his name's John Ransby is the last name. I follow him. So really good guys out there that kind of, if you will, dumb things down, right?
Chase Cunningham. Forgot Dr. Zero Trust, Chase Cunningham. But again, there's a plethora of information. First advice is figure out what you want to learn, figure out what you don't want to learn. You can do that by sort of surfing the net, and then go figure out where to apply money along a structure. Like I said, I'm not plugging EC Council just because they're our sponsor, but they do have a lot of great certifications, a lot of great content. So use the free resources to figure out what you do and you don't want to do, and then use the paid for resources to hone your skills and get some certifications behind your name.
Yeah, so I don't know if the people that are listening are going to be able to see this link I just put in the chat, but if not, just Google Paul Jeremy certification roadmap. And if you go to that, it'll show you pretty much all the certifications within cybersecurity and each silo or flavor of it. So as Terry alluded to, know what you're passionate about, right? Find the silo that you're most interested in. Look at those certifications. You can start from the bottom and kind of just go up, and just YouTube that. Say, hey, if you're interested in networking stuff, and this is kind of how Network Chuck, as a perfect example, got his experience. He was a Cisco certified network administrator. He's a CCNA. He came from the networking side of the house. So he has a free YouTube playlist of videos to get your CCNA. And there's a lot of other influencers out there that have the same. So, Google those certifications, watch those videos, do hands-on, sharing environments that, pretty much mimic what they're doing, and just get that hands-on experience.
Yep. Build your own lab at home. Personally, I think that I would recommend if you're a business or you're looking to hone one, hire someone like me or Clark to come in and help you develop a real plan from real incident response engagements, from real world experience. It's very hard to do this just by, this is one of those pitfalls of AI. You can ask AI to create you an IR plan, and it won't be very pragmatic. I do think this is one of those cases where you hire someone who's done it more than a time or two, who understands what an incident response engagement should look like from real world experience, and help them work, create it, B, practice it, and then implement it, and then test it. Clark, same?
Yeah, no, echo that. But also to bring up to practice it, right, is we run tabletop exercises, is what we call them, TTXs, right? So, you can ask AI to write a rough draft of a policy probably, but like you said, it's not too pragmatic. But then refining it, right? Bring in a consulting organizations like one of us to help refine that. And then the tabletop exercise is where you actually act as if you're going through a real world scenario, right? So, we perform those on a day-to-day basis where we say, okay, this just happened, what do you do? And you can either resort to your policy, to your incident response plan. Maybe there's a playbook in your IRP that is similar to the situation, so you can maybe use that. But it really puts yourself in the shoes of a real world scenario to then act as if you're actually going through that situation. So in the off chance that you do, you are better prepared.
Yep. And learn from other people's experience. This is one of those things where you don't ever want to do it in real life, but you need to be prepared for it in real life. And the only way to do that is to actually talk to some folks who've who've had to navigate it and successfully do it. Again, avail yourself of online resources, make it unique to your environment, practice it, but please avail yourself to someone who's actually done it. Clark and I have done it. Tony Curley at IBM's done it. Justin Turner at Microsoft, et cetera, et cetera. There's people who have done it and done it really, really well at scale. Make sure that you're inquiring from people who've actually lived through it. Happy Veterans Day. Thank you for your service. That just extends not only to our veterans, but those that serve your community. I think we forget that service to our fellow man and fellow person, fellow women, is something that we should all aspire to. I think looking out for those around us is an important characteristic.
Yep, echo that as well. And I don't know about you, Terry, but I'll be at Applebee's tonight, catching my free veterans meal. I got two brothers that are also in the service, so we're going to go to Applebee's. As mentioned previously, if you have a veteran in your organization, on your team, coworker, whatever it may be, reach out, ask them a couple of questions about their background. I guarantee you're not going to regret that. And if not, go to Applebee's and buy a veteran a beer. So appreciate it.
Airborne.
Happy Veterans Day.
Great advice, Clark.